It all began with a Craigslist ad, the kind that practically screamed, "Too good to be true." Night staff cleaner needed, $30 per hour, no experience necessary, must be able to follow instructions without question. I'd seen enough online grifts to know the drill. This one reeked of a pyramid scheme or something far worse, but desperation had a way of dulling one's senses. 3 weeks unemployed after the warehouse layoff. I couldn't afford to be choosy. So, I threw my hat in the ring, fully expecting to hear nothing back. To my astonishment, an email arrived within the hour, summoning me to an interview at the Old Crescent Theater, the one everyone had forgotten about the moment the multiplex sprang up downtown. The place was unsettling. No vibrant movie posters, no shimmering banners trumpeting the latest releases. Instead, faded prints of long-forgotten films lined the walls, their colors leached out by sun and time, twisted and distorted. The air hung thick with the scent of waxed floors and dust, but beneath that, a cloying sweetness lingered, like burnt sugar scorched on a stove. The man waiting for me in the lobby introduced himself as Mr. Alden. He was meticulously put together in a crisp, outdated uniform. A starched white shirt, a navy vest, and a silver name tag that simply read manager. His hair was perfectly combed, not a single strand out of place, but his smile never quite reached his eyes. "Sean, is it?" I managed a nod, my throat suddenly parched. "You have no prior experience working in a theater?" "No, sir, but I'm a fast learner," I replied, attempting a confident tone. He gave me a look that suggested my answer was utterly irrelevant. "This job isn't about learning. It's about obedience. If you can follow rules, you'll do fine." He handed me a laminated sheet, thick, plasticized with worn corners. At the top, the title read, "Rules for Night Staff." The list was concise, just 7 items. Do not enter Theater 6 after midnight, no matter what you hear inside. If Theater 2 is already unlocked when you begin your shift, lock it immediately and do not look inside. If someone knocks on the emergency exit from the inside, do not respond. The concession stand must be cleaned first. Do not consume anything found behind the counter. If the intercom plays music, stop what you're doing and stand still until it stops. There is no Theater 9. If the screen in Theater 4 turns on by itself, sit and watch. Do not leave until the movie ends. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, forcing a nervous laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. Mr. Alden remained impassive. "You will find cleaning supplies in the janitor's closet near Theater 1. Your shift begins promptly at 11 p.m. You will leave at 6 a.m. unless otherwise instructed. Never enter any theater during a movie." That was it. No application forms, no orientation, no HR meeting, just a bizarre set of instructions and an old man who made me sign a single sheet of paper. My name, the date, and a single line that read, "I understand the rules provided." My first shift was, all things considered, uneventful. The place was eerily silent, practically dead. I mopped the sticky tiles in the front lobby, wiped down the counters, and vacuumed the threadbare carpets. I steered clear of the theaters as instructed, though I couldn't resist peeking into Theater 3. It was empty, rows of cracked red seats facing a blank screen, nothing outwardly strange about it. By 5:45 a.m., I was back in the lobby, jacket on, keys in hand. Mr. Alden never reappeared. I simply let myself out, locked up, and went home. The second night was similar, yet something felt different. Theater 2 was already unlocked when I arrived. I remembered the rule. Lock it immediately and do not look inside. The door was ajar. A faint, sickly blue light pulsed from within, flickering like a dying fluorescent bulb. I hesitated, drawn by an unseen force. Something scraped across the floor inside. Slowly, deliberately. I took a shaky breath, pushed the door shut with more force than necessary, and locked it. My hand trembled on the knob. It wasn't until the third night that the thought of quitting began to take root. Not because of any dramatic occurrence, not yet. It was just the growing sense that something was profoundly wrong with this place. Time seemed to warp and distort. The clocks were never in sync. I'd round a corner and feel the unsettling sensation of being watched. At 3:22 a.m., the intercom hissed, then music, though not music exactly, more like a warped lullaby, slow and distorted, as if an ice cream truck were playing underwater. I froze, the mop slipping from my grasp and clattering onto the wet tile. The sound wasn't particularly loud, but it seemed to fill every available space. So I stood perfectly still, just as the rule demanded. A minute stretched into 2. The music abruptly ceased, replaced by the soft, static hum of silence. My body sagged with relief. I didn't accomplish much cleaning after that. By the end of my first week, I had witnessed enough to understand that the rules were not mere suggestions. They were lifelines. That was the night I heard the knocking. I was taking out the trash, heading toward the back corridor where the emergency exit was located. No one was supposed to be in the building. I had meticulously checked every room twice. And then it came 1 knock, then 2, then 3. I froze in place, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sound was emanating from the emergency door, the one clearly marked for use only in case of fire, but the sound wasn't muffled. It was too clear, too sharp, as if the knocking wasn't coming through the door itself but from the opposite side of the hallway. "Hello?" A voice called softly, barely above a whisper. I remained silent. "Can you hear me? Please, I need help. I got locked in." A woman's voice, young and filled with desperate pleading. "Please don't leave me." My feet seemed rooted to the spot. My fingers curled into tight fists. Every instinct screamed at me to throw open that door, but I couldn't, because there was one glaring inconsistency. There was no panic bar on the emergency exit. It only opened from the inside. Whoever was knocking had to have come from somewhere else entirely. And then I heard her. She whispered my name, or rather, the name I now went by in this cursed place. "Moll, please, I know you're there. I can feel you." It was then, and only then, that every survival instinct I possessed took over, and I turned and ran. The next day, a folded note awaited me, left by Mr. Alden atop the janitor cart. His handwriting was a meticulous cursive. It read, "Good, you listened. Not everyone does. You're doing fine. Just remember, the rules exist for your protection." That was it. No signature, no further explanation. Just confirmation that the knocking was not a figment of my imagination, that I had been tested, and that the laminated rules were more than mere suggestions. They were instructions for survival. By the time my second week at the mall theater began, I understood that the place wasn't simply old and forgotten. It was something far stranger, a place existing between the cracks of reality, hidden in plain sight. It operated on rules, not just strange ones, but sacred guidelines etched into the very walls themselves. Breaking them wasn't a matter of getting fired. It was a potential death sentence. And yet, I stayed. I'd love to paint myself as brave, but that would be a lie. It was about rent, gas, the measly $63 left in my bank account, and a credit card that was already screaming for mercy. Whatever this job was, whatever twisted rules it came with, I needed it more than I feared it. Or at least, that's what I desperately told myself. The second week was also when I met night staff. I arrived early that night, steeling myself for the usual emptiness, but the lobby wasn't quiet. Someone sat perched on the snack bar counter, legs swinging nonchalantly, wearing a red crescent theater hoodie that looked several sizes too big. Her hair was a wild mess, auburn curls frizzed and tangled as if she had just battled a hurricane. She seemed utterly out of place, and yet, there she was. "You must be the new guy," she said, her voice remarkably casual, as if we were meeting for coffee instead of standing in the unnerving silence of a cursed theater. "Moll," I replied, genuinely confused. "And you are?" "Night staff. I work here too, on and off, mostly off. How come I haven't seen you before?" She flashed a grin. "Because I only come when I have to, when the rules change." That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut, a cold dread seeping into my bones. "What do you mean, they change? You think the list is permanent?" Night staff slid off the counter and walked toward me, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling knowledge. "No, Moll, the rules grow. They react, they punish, and sometimes, just sometimes, they warn. I desperately wanted to ask more, to understand the implications of her words. But before I could form the question, she pointed down the hallway. "You need to check Theater 7 tonight. That's not in the rules." "It is now." The hallway leading to Theater 7 felt impossibly long, stretching with each step I took, like I was walking into the maw of some dark tunnel instead of a simple corridor. The overhead lights flickered ominously as I passed, one of them dimming just long enough to plunge me into near-total darkness. Night staff had vanished. No explanation, no goodbye. One moment she was beside me. The next, the hallway was empty, save for me and the ever-deepening silence. I reached Theater 7 and stood before the door. I half expected it to be hot to the touch or humming with some unnatural energy, but it was cold, lifeless, just a door. I opened it slowly, unsure of what I was even looking for. The theater was pitch black, a darkness that transcended mere movie theater dimness. This was a void, an abyss. My flashlight beam barely pierced it. The light swallowed whole like a match in a cave. I stepped inside, 1 foot over the threshold. Nothing happened. Another step and still nothing. Rows of empty seats unfolded before me, and the screen was blank, as it should be. I waited, held my breath, then turned to leave. The screen flickered just once, a brief burst of static, then nothing. I backed out of the room without a second glance. Later that night, I found a new sheet on the janitor's cart. The same plastic laminate, the same impersonal typeface. Rule 8. Do not enter Theater 7 unless instructed. If you do, exit immediately when the screen flickers. Do not wait for the second flicker. It hadn't flickered again. Not that I noticed. I sat on a bench in the lobby and stared at the sheet. 8 rules now. They really did change, evolve. The theater was watching, learning somehow. That was a terrifying thought. On Thursday, I broke a rule. Not intentionally, at least that's what I keep telling myself, but it doesn't really matter, does it? It was 4:15 a.m. I had just finished cleaning the restrooms when I passed Theater 4. The door was ajar. I peeked inside. The screen was on, displaying a grainy, sepia-toned film playing on an endless loop. A man sat at a table in a small, gray kitchen. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting, staring straight ahead, occasionally blinking. The audio consisted of nothing but soft static. I froze, paralyzed by a growing dread. Rule 7. If the screen in Theater 4 turns on by itself, sit and watch. Do not leave until the movie ends. My feet acted on their own, betraying my conscious thought. I walked into the room and found a seat right in the middle. The door shut softly behind me. The man on the screen remained motionless. Time passed. 5 minutes, 10, an eternity, and nothing happened. Then the man on the screen turned his head, not toward anything in the kitchen, but directly toward me. It wasn't a glitch, it wasn't some clever film technique. His eyes found mine through the swirling grain and noise. I felt the weight of his stare pressing down on me, a cold hand on my spine. He smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of his lips, and then he stood. I don't remember much after that. My vision blurred. My limbs locked up in rigid paralysis. Couldn't move, couldn't blink. It felt like he was stepping out of the screen, growing closer with every frame. When I woke up, I was in the lobby. The sun was rising. My phone was dead. My shoes were missing. A note was taped to the counter. You left too early. Do it properly next time. There was a single bullet point below it, stark and ominous. Rule 9. If the figure on the screen stands, do not look. Alright, here's the rewritten passage in the John Langan style, maintaining all original content and meaning while adhering to the specific instructions and continuity from the previous segment away. Do not close your eyes, do not move. By the weekend, I had given up trying to make sense of it all. I avoided Googling the Crescent Theater, didn't press Mr. Alden for answers, and didn't even breathe a word of it to my roommate, who probably just figured I was scrubbing toilets or maybe pulling security in some abandoned office building. Some truths were best left unsaid, trapped in the silence. Harper materialized again on Saturday, this time perched cross-legged on the floor of Theater 5. No movie flickered, no lights burned, Just her and the thick, stagnant air. "You watched it, didn't you?" she asked, her gaze fixed on something beyond me. "I didn't finish it." She nodded slowly. "Then it's gonna keep showing up, different places, different screens. It wants you to finish it." "What happens if I do?" She tilted her head, a strange gesture. "No one knows for sure." "How do you know all this?" She offered no reply, simply rose to her feet and vanished. Her footsteps made no sound. I was alone once more. I encountered the man from the screen again 2 nights later, this time reflected in the polished surface of the popcorn machine. He stood directly behind me, pale and utterly devoid of expression. I didn't turn around. I merely lowered my eyes, took a step back, and walked away. I didn't run, didn't scream, I just followed the unwritten rule I had somehow absorbed. If you see it outside the screen, ignore it completely. I cut my shift short that night, simply walking out at 5:30, leaving the job unfinished. There were no immediate consequences. A new rule was now affixed to the janitor's cart. Rule 10. If you see the figure from theater for anywhere else in the building, do not engage, do not speak, do not acknowledge its presence. By the close of week 2, I recognized I was in too deep. My dreams had begun to bleed into the theater's palette. The faded crimson, the velvety blacks, the tarnished gold trim. I would awaken to the faint whir of film reels spinning or the soft rustle of popcorn. Even though my room was perfectly still and silent, something was changing inside me. I could feel it like a subtle shift in the earth beneath my feet. The architecture of my fear had been remodeled. It wasn't about spectral apparitions or grotesque monsters anymore. It was about patterns, about the inescapable weight of attention. The Crescent Theater wasn't merely haunted. It was aware, and it had begun to watch me in return. There's a threshold in this job where terror ceases to be a shout. It no longer screams in your ears or turns your legs to jelly with every flickering light. It transforms into something quiet, something that lies in wait, like stale air in a sealed room, pressing in gradually, reminding you with every breath that you are an intruder. That was week 3 for me. No jump scares, no violent confrontations, just the building exhaling more deeply, observing more intently. And the rules, they didn't just evolve. They began to actively respond to me. On Monday, I discovered a notebook in my locker. I hadn't placed it there. No one had mentioned it. Just a simple black journal, devoid of any title, with a leather cover that felt unnervingly warm, almost feverish to the touch. Inside, someone had scrawled a rule in crimson ink. Rule 11. When your shadow no longer mimics your movements, return to Theater 1, sit in the front row, do not look behind you. It wasn't laminated, wasn't official in appearance, just scribbled like a desperate reminder to someone whose memory had become unreliable. I closed the book, shoved it to the back of the locker, and attempted to bury it from my thoughts. I should have heeded it more closely. It was approximately 2 a.m. when I first noticed it. I was sweeping near the concession stand, lost in the familiar rhythmic motions, back and forth, back and forth. Then I realized something was slightly out of sync. I glanced down. My shadow remained still. I blinked, swept again. My arms moved, my body moved, but the shadow simply stood there, mid-sweep, frozen in place. And then, as if awakening from a trance, it jerked violently to match my movements, like a marionette manipulated by clumsy hands. I dropped the broom with a clatter. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to escape that lobby and embrace the open air, to feel the wind and streetlights and noise once more. But the notebook's warning resurfaced in my mind. Rule 11. So I made my way to Theater 1. The room was deserted, of course, cold, still, possessing the kind of stillness that only exists underground, where even sound hesitates to travel. I sat in the front row. The lights dimmed behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I heard the door creak shut, sealing me in. I don't know how long I remained there. I counted in my head, reached 600, perhaps more. At some point, I ceased to be aware of time and simply waited for the presence behind me to dissipate. It never made a sound, never drew closer, but I knew something was there, watching. I could feel the weight of its gaze, like icy fingers tracing the back of my neck. Eventually, the lights flickered back on. I stood up, and my shadow mirrored my movements perfectly. The notebook had vanished from my locker. On Wednesday, Harper reappeared. This time, she appeared worse for wear. Pale, trembling, dark circles carved beneath her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in days. She offered no greeting, simply slumped onto the bench near the lost and found cabinet and stared at the floor. "You okay?" I asked, concerned. She shook her head slowly, a gesture of despair. "He started writing again." "Who?" "The projectionist." I didn't grasp the meaning, didn't press for clarification. It felt like the kind of knowledge that wanted to remain concealed. She lifted her gaze to meet mine, her eyes unnaturally wide. "Don't open the lost and found tonight. It doesn't matter what you hear, doesn't matter what you think you see. Don't open it." "What's in there?" "Memories," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Pieces of people who didn't follow the rules." I wanted to dismiss it with a laugh, pretend it was some morbid joke, but I couldn't because I remembered the bag that stirred in the trash chute last week. I remembered remained concealed. She lifted her gaze to meet mine, her eyes unnaturally wide. "Don't open the lost and found tonight. It doesn't matter what you hear, doesn't matter what you think you see. Don't open it." "What's in there?" "Memories," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Pieces of people who didn't follow the rules." I wanted to dismiss it with a laugh, pretend it was some morbid joke, but I couldn't because I remembered the bag that stirred in the trash chute last week. I remembered the scream that followed it. I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. "Okay, I won't open it." At 3:03 a.m., the cabinet that served as the lost and found started rattling, a sound that sliced through the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, metallic, like something with fingernails scraping against the inside. Then came the voice. "Sean, you left your keys." I patted my pockets, a wave of dread washing over me. The keys were there, cold against my skin. "Don't leave me in here. You forgot me." The voice wasn't similar to mine, wasn't close. It was my voice, the exact tone, pitch, cadence I knew so well. I stepped back, a chill crawling up my spine. "It's cold, so cold. I can't feel my legs anymore." The cabinet door rattled harder, the metallic scratching intensifying. "Don't you want to see what you lost?" I didn't wait to find out. I left immediately, didn't even glance back, cleaned the rest of the lobby in absolute silence, avoiding that side of the room as if it radiated poison, a palpable aura of wrongness clinging to it. In the morning, I discovered another rule taped to the light switch, stark white against the plastic. Rule 12. If the lost and found speaks to you, ignore it. Its contents are not yours anymore. Thursday night, the projector in Theater 6 switched on all by itself. That wasn't particularly unusual anymore. Strange occurrences had become the norm. What was unusual was the fact that it played a home video, not a movie, not even a film reel. It looked like grainy footage from an old handheld camera, shakily aimed at a birthday party. Balloons bobbing, streamers hanging limp, a table laden with a cake. A little boy was blowing out candles while people clapped and cheered from somewhere just off-screen. The boy looked hauntingly familiar. It was me. I stood frozen in place at the back of the theater, the hair on my arms standing on end. The footage panned slowly around the room, catching fleeting glimpses of my childhood home. My parents, my sister, all laughing, alive, untouched by the cruel hand of the years that would come. Then the image glitched just for a split second. The lights flickered erratically. The screen pulsed with a sickening light. When it stabilized, the party was gone, vanished without a trace. The room on the screen was empty, the same setting but aged, abandoned, decayed. The walls were cracked and peeling. The balloons were deflated husks. The cake was covered in buzzing flies, and someone stood in the corner, facing away from the camera, their form radiating a chilling stillness. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and fled. Friday, Harper was gone, vanished without a trace. Her nameplate on the old staff roster near the office door had been scratched out with a thick red marker. I asked Mr. Alden about her, my voice barely above a whisper. He just blinked, his expression blank. Who? Harper? She said she worked here, you must know her. He frowned slightly, then looked past me toward the hallway, his gaze unfocused. There hasn't been a Harper on staff since 2016. What happened to her? She broke a rule. Which one? He gave me a look that stopped me cold. A silent warning that resonated deep in my bones. The one we don't write down. That night, I was alone, the only soul in the building. The mall theater felt colder than ever before, the air heavier, thick with an unseen dread. The rules didn't feel like guidelines anymore. They felt like a countdown, each one marking a step closer to some unknown horror. Near the end of my shift, the lights in the lobby dimmed, casting long, distorted shadows, and a buzzing filled the air, like static crawling across glass, a sound that set my teeth on edge. I turned and saw my reflection in the ticket counter window. It didn't move, didn't mimic my actions. My real body stepped back, a primal fear gripping my heart, but the reflection stayed still. Then slowly, deliberately, it smiled, not a smirk, not a twitch, but a wide, splitting grin that stretched impossibly far, teeth too sharp, eyes too wide, too knowing. I blinked, and the reflection was gone, no sound, no movement, just my own wide-eyed face staring back, a mirror of my terror. There was no rule for this, no guidance, no warning. I went home early again, didn't clock out, didn't leave a note, just fled into the night. When I returned the next night, there was a new sheet taped to the janitor's cart. The paper crinkled and yellowed. Rule 13. If your reflection smiles without you, leave. You are not alone. By the end of the third week, I wasn't afraid of dying. Death seemed almost a welcome escape. I was afraid of being remembered by this place, of it etching me into its walls, its screens, its cursed little rooms, of becoming part of the footage, part of the whispering, part of the rules, forever trapped within its grasp. Because the longer I stayed, the clearer it became. This place didn't just punish rule breakers. It kept them, consumed them, made them a part of its twisted reality. It was during the fourth week that the Crescent Theater stopped pretending, abandoned all pretense of normalcy. By now, I could navigate its halls with my eyes closed, anticipate its movements, and dodge its tricks with something close to instinct. The rules weren't just rules anymore. They were second nature, ingrained in my very being. I knew when to stop moving, when not to look, and when to sit down and watch until the movie ended, no matter what screamed behind my seat, no matter what horrors unfolded on the screen. I knew how to listen for the lie in a voice calling my name from the wrong side of a locked door, how to differentiate the real from the imitation. I knew how to survive, but survival wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't the end goal. The theater wanted more, it wanted everything. Started subtly with shifts in perception, distortions of reality. The walls began to move, not visibly, not with dramatic quakes or groans. They shifted like thoughts drift, subtly altering the space around me. One moment I was walking past Theater 3, and the next it was Theater 5, the numbers changing like a cruel joke. The hallway I'd just come down behind me would vanish when I turned back, replaced with one I hadn't used in years, a labyrinth of forgotten corridors. Doors that had once been bricked shut were suddenly open, inviting me into the unknown. Signs flickered between languages I didn't understand, symbols that danced before my eyes. One night, as I stood at the concession stand, the air smelled strongly of seawater, the scent of decay and brine. Another time, it smelled like rot, the stench of death permeating the air. And once, I swear the popcorn machine was full of teeth, gleaming white in the dim light. The notebook returned, the same black cover, the same too warm leather, radiating an unnatural heat. It was sitting on the stool in the projection booth, waiting for me, as if it knew I would come. I opened it this time, a sense of inevitability washing over me. There were 3 rules scribbled in frantic handwriting. The ink smeared and faded. Rule 14. If the marquee outside displays a movie you recognize from your dreams, do not enter that theater, turn away and never look back. Rule 15. If the projector in theater 1 plays footage from the future, do not tell anyone what you saw. Keep the knowledge locked away. Rule 16. If you see yourself inside the building while you are still inside the building, leave immediately, don't hesitate. One of you is not supposed to be there, one of you is an imposter. I tried to tell Mr. Alden about the walls moving, the shifting reality. He just nodded slowly, his eyes distant. It does that sometimes, he said, his voice flat. Shouldn't that concern you? I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. He sighed, a weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of ages. The theater's not a place, Sean. It's an agreement. We break it more often than we realize. With whom? I asked, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. He offered no reply, simply turned back to the stacked reels of old film that resided behind his desk. A silent dismissal. Friday night, I shattered Rule 14. It wasn't a conscious act of defiance. I didn't even register it until I was already across the threshold. The door to Theater 8 stood ajar. A siren song of soft piano music drifting out. The kind that evokes the feeling of sinking into slumber beneath a weighted blanket. Without thinking, I stepped inside. The screen illuminated my apartment, not just any view, but the precise perspective I beheld each morning upon opening my eyes. The bed, the perpetually clicking fan I neglected to tighten, the poster on the wall with its faded corner. Someone occupied the bed, it was me. I wheeled around to leave. The door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. Retreating from the screen, my breath grew shallow. My heart hammered against my ribs. On the screen, the figure in the bed stirred, reaching for the nightstand, picking up a phone and answering it. There was no ring, no incoming call, yet it nodded as if listening intently, then turned to face the screen. It smiled, a chillingly familiar expression. I blinked, and the lights plunged into darkness. I awoke in Theater 3, alone, the silence absolute, no movie playing, no sound at all. I checked my phone. 6 missed calls, all originating from my own number. Saturday night, Mr. Alden was absent from his office. The light blazed, but the room was empty. His desk was clear. The drawer containing the rules stood open and empty. His coat was gone. No note, no sign of struggle, merely absence. I scoured the building from top to bottom, from the projection booth to storage, meticulously checking theaters 1 through 8. He wasn't there, but Theater 9 was. You remember Rule 6, right? There is no Theater 9. Yet, at the end of the east hallway, where a broom closet had always been, a new door had materialized, large, black, the number 9 painted on it in stark white. The paint was fresh, still wet. I refrained from touching it, simply stood there, transfixed. Behind the door, something breathed. A long, slow, deliberate inhalation and exhalation. I retreated to the lobby. Harper was there. I hadn't seen her in over a week. She appeared gaunt, utterly drained. You found it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Theater 9. She nodded slowly. It wasn't supposed to open yet. Where is Mr. Alden? She glanced toward the hallway, a flicker of fear in her eyes. He made a deal. What kind of deal? She offered no explanation. Instead, she extended a film reel toward me. The metal canister was ancient, rust eating away at the edges. Play this in Theater 5 midnight. Don't stop it, don't leave. When it ends, you'll know what to do. I opened my mouth to protest, but she had already vanished. Midnight arrived with unnerving speed. I stood in the projection booth of Theater 5, my fingers trembling as I loaded the reel. The machine groaned to life, the film caught, the screen flickered. It was surveillance footage, grainy, black and white. The theater lobby empty and still. Then a figure entered the frame, me, not from last week, not from earlier that night. Me in the present moment, walking past a camera that shouldn't exist. The film jumped to another view. The break room, me again, sitting at the table, consuming something from a plastic container. Another jump. The booth, me standing at the projector watching the film. I looked up and saw myself watching myself. I recoiled from the machine. The air in the booth thickened, buzzing with static electricity. My teeth ached with an unbearable pressure. From the hallway outside, footsteps echoed, deliberate, chillingly familiar. I killed the projector and all the lights extinguished. Somehow, I found myself in the main lobby. The screens on the walls no longer displayed trailers. They were playing me. Every mistake, every broken rule, every moment I failed to adhere to instructions exactly. I saw myself peering into the lost and found. I saw my eyelids drooping during the theater for screening. I saw the instant my shadow had fallen behind. Then I saw Mr. Alden. He stood in Theater 9, hands raised in supplication, a figure cloaked in black looming over him. Not a person, not precisely, more akin to a rent in reality given form. Its face was an old film reel, spinning at an impossible speed. He spoke, but the film was devoid of sound. Then the screen went black. Underneath the screen, text appeared. Rule 17. If Theater 9 opens, a manager must be given. I heard someone weeping. I followed the sound to the hallway. Harper was huddled against the wall, her face buried in her hands. It wanted him, she whimpered. He thought giving himself would close the door again, but it never wanted just him. What does it want? She raised her gaze to mine, tears streaking her face. It wants an audience. That night, I was haunted by dreams of rows of seats filled with motionless figures, eyes wide, faces blank, all watching me with unnerving intensity. I stood on a stage devoid of a script, no lines to recite, just a spotlight that burned with unbearable heat. Behind me, a door creaked open. The number 9 was painted on it in blood. I awoke screaming, drenched in sweat. The notebook lay on my pillow, bearing only one rule this time. Rule 18. There must always be a performance. I didn't report for work that night, didn't check in, didn't call, simply remained barricaded in my apartment, every light blazing, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. At precisely 12 a.m., my TV flickered to life. No remote, no signal, just static, then my own face, then the theater, then Theater 9, waiting. For 3 nights, I avoided the theater at all costs. Each time the clock chimed midnight, something occurred. My TV would activate. Static, then a single frame of Theater 9, always the door, never open, never shut, simply waiting. My phone would vibrate with calls from unknown numbers. No voicemails left, just missed calls from area codes that didn't exist. I tried to sleep, tried to eat, but the theater had already burrowed its way beneath my skin, an insidious parasite. I wasn't living anymore. I was merely waiting, trapped in a state of perpetual dread ever since the old clock chimed midnight. Something unsettling occurred. My TV would activate. Static, then a single frame of Theater 9, always the door, never open, never shut, simply waiting. My phone would vibrate with calls from unknown numbers. No voicemails left, just missed calls from area codes that didn't exist. I tried to sleep, tried to eat, but the theater had already burrowed its way beneath my skin, an insidious parasite. I wasn't living anymore. I was merely waiting, trapped in a state of perpetual dread. The 4th night, I discovered a flyer taped to my apartment door, a relic of old, yellowed paper stamped with the Crescent Theater's logo, the very one they hadn't utilized since the distant 80s. It proclaimed, "Tonight only, final performance, doors open at midnight." Beneath that, scrawled hastily in pen, "Bring the book, don't be late." The notebook had been absent since the last rule materialized. But when I turned, there it was, resting on my kitchen table, open to a blank page, a pen poised beside it. I picked it up and departed, neglecting to lock the door behind me. I didn't anticipate needing it again. The Crescent Theater was already illuminated upon my arrival, not just the lobby lights. Every single theater glowed through the windows, a soft, golden pulse like heartbeats echoing behind glass. The air carried the scent of ash and candy, like something sweet irrevocably burned long ago. Night staff was waiting inside. She offered no greeting, just a nod toward the east hallway, then turned and walked away. I felt the urge to stop her, to inquire if this marked the end or the beginning, but her very gait conveyed all I needed to comprehend. She wouldn't be present when it concluded. The door to If Theater 9 stood wide open, devoid of a number now, merely a hollow space where the paint had bubbled and peeled away. Inside, darkness stretched farther than the building's dimensions should have permitted. A corridor in place of seats. No screen, no rows, just a solitary aisle carpeted in deep red, vanishing into the abyss. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. The corridor twisted and turned. At times, it resembled a backstage area with ropes and scaffolding dangling precariously from above. At other times, it mirrored the tunnels behind the projection rooms, all narrow beams and chemical odors. Once, I swear sometimes I walked through my own childhood bedroom, complete with peeling glow-in-the-dark stars stubbornly clinging to the ceiling. All of it flickered, as though someone were changing channels with frantic haste. And all the while I carried the notebook, its pages flipped seemingly of their own volition. Sometimes I observed words, sometimes drawings. One page depicted the lobby as I recalled it on my first day. Another showcased the same room years later, overgrown with vines and decay. On another page, there was only a single sentence. You are both the actor and the stage. Eventually, the corridor opened into a massive auditorium, far larger than it should have been, larger than any structure in this town had room for. Seats stretched into the darkness like an ocean of red velvet, and every single one of them was occupied. I couldn't discern their faces, only silhouettes, still, silent, observing. The stage lights flickered to life. At the center stood On Thursday. He appeared weary, more aged than before, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling, yet he smiled upon seeing me, something both sad and proud evident in his expression. You came, he said. I didn't have a choice. None of us do, he agreed. He extended his hand. I gave him the notebook. He flipped to the last page. Then, with deliberate care, he handed me the pen. Write the last rule. I looked down. The page was blank. My hand trembled. What do I write? On Thursday stepped back into the shadows. What you've learned, what must come next. This is your theater now. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but it was futile. The crowd was waiting. I bent down. The pen felt heavy in my grasp. I wrote, Rule 19. When the curtain rises, you must perform, even if you don't remember the lines. As soon as the pen lifted from the page, the stage lights flared, blindingly. The notebook burst into flame in my hands, curling into ash between my fingers. The crowd clapped, not wildly, just once, in perfect, unified rhythm, and then the curtain rose. What followed defies easy description. It wasn't acting, not truly. It was memory. It was moments I hadn't realized I'd forgotten. Childhood fears, teenage mistakes. Every instance I broke a promise. Every time I uttered a lie. All of it played out on the stage. Me dressed in costumes I never wore. Reciting lines I never memorized but knowing precisely what came next. It wasn't a story. It was a confession laid bare. The audience remained motionless. They simply watched, eyes locked, breaths held. And as when I reached the end, standing alone under a pale white spotlight, I understood. This was my audition, not to leave, to stay. When the lights went down, the silence pressed in like a tangible weight. Then clapping began. One by one, slow, deliberate, like raindrops preceding a flood. The figures stood and applauded, their hands never quite touching, the sound not quite real. On Thursday stepped onto the stage beside me. He gazed at the crowd, then at me. They accept. Accept what? You as the new manager. I shook my head. I didn't agree to this. I didn't volunteer. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You performed. You wrote the rule. That was the agreement. The stage creaked beneath us. The audience began to dissolve, their forms melting into static, drifting upward into the rafters like smoke. On Thursday began to fade as well. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said. You watch the doors, you follow the rules, and you write the new ones. Wait. I don't know what I'm doing. He smiled faintly. You didn't know then either. Then he was gone completely. I awoke in the office, seated on Thursday's desk. In his chair, the old clock ticking steadily behind me. The keys were in my pocket. The first shift commenced in an hour. The janitor cart was freshly stocked. On the desk rested a new notebook, bound in black leather, its first page blank. There was only one note taped to the desk. Rule 1. Never let them know you're afraid. They can smell it. I sat back, took a deep breath, and waited for the first knock on the door.